This is the Final Word Cricket podcast. Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon, we're well into season 19, the 28th episode of it. Not really the 28th. We've done a great many more than that, but the naming convention is that the weekly eps get their own designation. It's the it's not the 26th, it's the 16th of February, where I am and where Jeff is as well in Melbourne. And we have lots to get through today. Bit of World Cup stuff off the top just to round out on a very busy weekend, especially India, Pakistan matters. Then a big chunky segment on all things women's cricket because we're back into internationals with Australia, India, Hall of Fame, and we've had the Belinda Clark Awards this week as well. Some stuff going on in New Zealand, some stuff going on in England. Then Emma John will rejoin us for the final segment of her lap around Australia. Dean Jones Cup, Sheffield Shield, Ranji Trophy. It's all there. Jeff, hello.
Hold me back. Hold me back. Be still my heart. Can't wait to tear into it. The week's events, there's been so much T20 cricket going on. The only way I've been able to follow it, like many people in Australia, I imagine, is listening to our daily shows when I wake up because it mostly happens while I'm asleep. So thank you for the service. My salute is out there to you particularly because you've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting on that, and Daniel Norcross and the rest of the crew. I'm going to say, before I start, Adam, a nice thing happened over the last few weeks. Sheeds, everybody loves a Sheeds. This is not Kevin Sheedy, but this is Jake Sheedy, patron of the show. Normally, I'd be cracking a stomping ground because they're the brewery that we work with and we're giving away cases of their beer. And if you want to win cases of their beer, you join the patron and that's how you do it. But Jake, he runs a vineyard down in Tasmania. We'll be talking about Tasmania later on. And we've been wanting to get down there for a couple of years because they have like a vintners game, like an annual fixture between certain groups of wine growers and other people who do other jobs in that particular area. And he said, well, you need to try some of what we've been putting together. So he sent me over a box. This is not a commercial arrangement. I'm just saying this because I think it's lovely. Because look at how nice that label is. Sisu is the name, SISU, which I think is like Norwegian or something for courage. I'm pretty sure that there was that movie called Sisu a couple of years ago where an angry, maybe it was Finnish, maybe it was an angry Finlandian guy was going around taking on a bunch of Nazis, which we like to see, particularly in this era, even more so. And my word, it's good. That's all I'm going to say. Sisu, SISU, had the Riesling the other day. Delightful, absolutely delightful. Buttery, delicious, rich.
It'd be appropriate if it were Norwegian, given the remarkable first week of the Winter Olympics they've enjoyed. I always love it when Norway end up top of the table above nations with far greater populations, but they dominated 4 years ago. I know you've been doing a bit of that, Jeff, on the Guardian live coverage. I've sort of not been able to due to my scheduling at the moment, but love this fortnight when it comes around not just learning about new sports, but even Australia, 5 medals already, 3 gold. Remember like in the early days when Australia won those 2 golds at Salt Lake City. It was such a novelty almost with, Stephen Bradbury the way he won, but Alyssa Camplin as well. Since then, I wouldn't say Australia's a juggernaut in the Winter Games, but 3 golds in a week is a mighty effort considering you go back to Montreal where we didn't win a gold medal at all in the Summer Games, or Seoul was 3 golds in 1988, 3 in the Winter Games. Go, you good thing, go.
Mm-hmm. And Scotty James was, a hair away from making 4 as well. Just fell on that final landing. I love the snowboarding. Like, I love the way that they treat each other. It's the most, and I don't think it is forced, it's the most camaraderie-based sport across national lines in that you see riders who've already finished a run celebrating someone else's run that's better than theirs because they landed a sick trick. They really seem to be there for the sport itself first, which I love. And Johannes Krabo, the cross-country skier, is like one of my minor obsessions from the previous Winter Olympics because I did a lot of the live blogging, the Guardian stuff the previous time. This time around, I'm only doing a couple because it involves waking up horribly early, and there's a reason that I'm not staying up until 5 a.m. to watch the T20 World Cup, and it's not so that I can instead wake up at 5 a.m. to do the Winter Olympics. But I have made time for a couple of Krabo races, and he's won. He's won 3 of his golds so far, and there's going to be 4 of them, and there's another couple to go. So he's in every event. Like, he could win gold in 6 events. It's insane. Wow. Nobody has been that. Like, he's the favourite for a 50K race, and then also won the sprint. Like, it's ridiculous breadth to have within the one sport. So. Yeah, Norway, get around them, get amongst them.
And Josie Baff as well. I managed to snowball cross women's pointy end, and to keep using that term over and over on the podcast. I missed it all, but watched it on kind of like tape delay, not knowing the result. So at about 1 a.m. on Saturday morning, seeing Josie Baff get to the finish line by, was it like a 500th of a second or something like that, giving it the big ones in the living room. That's what the Olympics are all about. That's what the Olympics are all about. The other thing that happened this weekend, thank you everybody who sent nice messages on Winnie's birthday on Valentine's Day. Always appreciate that. It's just a lovely part of our Final Word community that people know that's her birthday because it's Valentine's Day. And we celebrated it at Soft Plate as planned, and she had a terrific day. Also, I want to acknowledge one of our patrons, Dan Foreman, who's a great supporter of what we do. He's played for the Final Word as well. His son, Harry, was in the 800 metres at the National Indoor Champs on the weekend in track and field, of course, and that was on BBC TV. So I know a lot of our UK patrons were very excited to see young Harry doing his thing, and I'm sure Dan was there and very proud. And hopefully, maybe we can get Harry to play a Final Word game. That'd be a flex. We've got a national runner playing in our 11. We'll have plenty of opportunities for that through 2026. Jeff,
put him on the grill. Put him on the grill. That's all I have to say about that. Let's get into the business of the week at hand. We'll start. Why not? Because we've done it for the last few weeks with India-Pakistan, because it did happen and it was as underwhelming as a cricket match as it generally is, in that Pakistan weren't really in it, and the main point of interest was what sort of snarky comments everybody would make about a certain Pakistan spin bowler who we flagged might have some of these issues talked about a few weeks ago, and there wasn't actually that much of note that happened on the field, but the fact it got on, well, it mattered. But I mean, yeah, I don't know if this is just jadedness of people who follow the game professionally, but there seems to be a very down in the mouth attitude towards this fixture at the moment.
I reckon this is where it's changed. The sentiment has changed. It feels like almost a bit of a turning point, because this was a shit show, right? I mean, forget about the game and the lopsided result and all the rest of it. The 4 or 5 weeks that preceded it, all that happened at the Champions Trophy last year. And let's not forget the Women's World Cup either, the way that was scheduled because of the goings on between India and Pakistan. So there've been lots of bits and pieces in the last 12 months. And it felt like it came to the boil this weekend across the board with the analysis on it. Take Harsha Bogle, who's covered so many of these, great friend of ours and respect his opinion. He himself went out on social media the day before the game and said that he just couldn't get up for it due to all of the different political angles that informs the way this game was trending. Mike Atherton wrote a great piece in the Times over the weekend as well, which went to similar points about how the headline read there. It was so toxic that it's hard to enjoy the actual spectacle. Sanjay Mandraker, who went really hard on the captains not shaking hands. It's such a silly thing. It's unbecoming of a nation like ours, etc. So I just think the mood's changed. For so much of this build-up, it was, well, if this game doesn't take place, then the financial security of the game is jeopardized. Well, I think what it really tells you is that there is an integrity issue at the heart of the finances of international cricket. If something like this needs to be built up in such a way each and every time, that there's something fundamentally amiss. The fact that the games themselves are so underwhelming, with a couple of exceptions, like the one in America a couple of years ago, which went all the way to the wire. But broadly speaking, the games themselves are not an occasion. It's everything else that feeds into it. Feels to me now we have reached that point where, yes, it will continue, but at least now it'll be with that undercurrent of, gee, what a shambles that our game relies so heavily on one fixture. Can we do better than this? These are the types of questions that I think we're now willing to ask that maybe a decade ago we weren't asking. We were just taking it as read. Well, now I think there's a moment at least to consider where the game should be into the next 10 years.
If you're designing an aircraft and you say, oh, there's a button in the cockpit and you have to press this button every 15 minutes or the wings fall off, that's a bad design. You know, if you have one critical failure point in a complex and expensive system, it's basically Death Star syndrome, right? If you shoot a laser beam into this one hatch, the entire thing blows up. That's not good engineering of any system, of any complex system. It's not good engineering of something that is very expensive and that will cause ruin in a certain part of a global economy if it comes crashing down. And the fact that so much of the game is so reliant on this, the fact that this fixture and its many, many variants, its many clones that will happen in other tournaments across the years is such a load-bearing thing is not sustainable. So maybe this is the point where it has to be faced and it has to be realised that you can't carry on like this. There needs to be a broadening of ways in which the game can support itself.
The last thing I'd say is I feel sorry for the players in situations like this, because ultimately all the eyeballs turn to them, right? And I also feel for the vast majority of fans, the vast majority of reasonable-minded fans who would love to live in a more peaceful world. And of course, there are fans at the extremes. You know, most of the comments that we receive are probably from people who live in those margins, right? The vast majority of fans don't feel this way. That's the sense I get when I've been in India and Pakistan. But unfortunately, so much of the design of the model you're talking about there caters to the extremes of the argument.
Yeah.
And that's politics 101, trying to almost talk to the base, if you like. And it's at the expense of the game, at the expense of the tournament, the integrity of tournaments, plural, like I mentioned before, the Champions Trophy last year, the Women's World Cup, which ultimately was held in a monsoon season in Sri Lanka with multiple games, many games washed out or compromised due to this. And it all comes back to the same source problem. So hopefully for everyone's sake in the game, not least the players and the vast majority of players, vast majority of fans, there can be conversations had between now and the next global tournament, which is in South Africa in September, October next year, might be October, November next year for the men. Because I know the women's tournament in England this year will have a part of this, but the men's tournaments where it gets far more heated. There can be ways to help just untangle some of this, so we don't have, you know, what you're describing there, the 15 minutes before the bomb goes off on the bottom of the train in that Idris Elba show at the moment. You know, you can't go on like that. You can't go on living like that, because at some point the bomb will go off in cricket terms, and then the finances of the game will be deeply compromised.
Yep, and the number of tournaments that have to be held in Asia because of the simple matter of how many full member nations there are. Afghanistan is not hosting a tournament anytime soon. You can have the odd tournament in that sort of African bloc of nations. You can have some England and Australia hosting, and you can have some Caribbean hosting, but you know, half your tournaments, basically, if not more, will be hosted between some combination of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. And if you've got this ongoing problem every time there's a tournament in that part of the world, it's totally unsustainable. So anyway, that's where they're at. And Australia are over there in the midst of this in some strife at the moment. We're going to have one of these interesting situations where I don't know if this episode will go out after the match they play against Sri Lanka? Okay. So Australia may be knocked out of the World Cup by the time this goes live.
Well, there's a bit going on here. So, I mean, this is classic. We've done this many times, so I think our audience will appreciate the fact that England are currently 159 for 6 against Italy in the 17th over. That game will be well and truly finished, and there'll be an episode in the feed already that precedes this one that run with Matt Roller and myself talking about both England and Italy and Australia and South Africa and Afghanistan, UAE as well from earlier this morning. But, I suppose the point of interest here will be that Steve Smith has been parachuted in. He has replaced Josh Hazlewood. I was making the case the other day, Jeff, that they should immediately send Mitchell Stark over there, pull him out of whatever he's doing, pop him on a flight and get him straight there for the Sri Lanka game. Well, that hasn't happened, but Steve Smith's not a bad option given he was already on standby and he was the man with the hot hand in the BBL. So I don't really know who he comes in for. I know Stoinis is fit with that hand problem. Mitch Marsh is apparently fit as well. So it'll be a calibration of the top 7, and they'll need to beat Sri Lanka, or they will be, in all probability, out of the tournament.
Well, this is the curious bit, is because those two were under the injury cloud, to use the parlance, but are apparently, as you say, available. So in that case, why are you bringing in the extra bat when you've got Stoinis and Marsh, the two under question? You've then got
wholesale changes.
You've got Cameron Green. You've got Glenn Maxwell. You've got Matt Renshaw, who's the only one who did any good the other day. You've got Tim David. You've got Josh Inglis. You've got Cooper Connolly, who's, not making heaps of runs lately, but really more an option with the bat than with the ball, although that's not how his current season's panned out. So plenty of batting options already. It doesn't entirely make sense. This is where Smith needs to come in, but presumably he's going to play. It seems odd that they would bring him into the squad if they were then going to leave him on the sidelines. So
he's playing. Yeah,
I don't know. He's got to go to India hype from the Big Bash, from having a couple of good knocks at the SCG, which is something that he's pretty prone to doing, has got him back into this squad, and maybe this is it. The road to LA 28 starts here.
Yeah, I think that they'll change the team quite a bit. I mean, who knows? As I said before, it's probably redundant us spending too much time on this because the game will be in the past tense when this goes live. But that will be all in the feed with Matty Roller and myself. Some other bits and pieces. Rashid Khan, the 700th time he's taken a wicket in T20 cricket was this morning. So that's one of those ones that, it sounds crazy that someone would have played enough games for that. But I suppose Glenn Maxwell played his 500th T20 the other day, which is not for nothing either. So, some milestones in the group stage. The Super 8 start. I think we get to them on Saturday. Then it's a slightly less chaotic rhythm to the daily feed. After that, we'll still be shows every day, but we're looking at 1 or 2 games rather than trying to do 3 games in 30 minutes, which is typically quite a wild thing to do. So, hope you've been enjoying it. Jeff, why don't we dismount from the World Cup and give ourselves a good quarter of an hour or so here to talk about what's been happening in Australian women's cricket specifically. Annabelle Sutherland has gone back-to-back in the Belinda Clark Award. Now, there wasn't an awards night per se. That's because, we used to have the Alan Border Medal around this time of year, didn't we, Jeff? But with the way things have played out,
the Australian Cricket
Awards,
it's
too hard.
As the name shifted to once the BCA, the Belinda Clark Award came in, which they had to call that. They couldn't call it a medal because there was already a Belinda Clark medal. There are so many Belinda Clark adjacent things going on. But yeah, because the men's team or, the T20 chunk of it were going to be off at this tournament, the women were preparing for their series against India, there wasn't a convenient spot in the calendar to put the awards night. So it hasn't happened. So they've just sort of quietly announced that, Annabelle's won that one and that the men's prizes will be announced at some time in, the fairly near future, but maybe it'll be after the World Cup. I don't know if they want to do it in the middle of the tournament, but it's interesting.
Telling,
so just got it over Beth Mooney, who's T20 Player of the Year, but not One Day Player of the Year. And Sutherland had that plus, they don't have a Test Player of the Year because they don't play often enough to warrant it.
That is quite telling. We're a quarter of a century into this award being given out. I think 99-2000 was the first summer of it, I reckon. That we've gone in, it was meant to be cricket's Brownlow and it felt that way for a number of years. Now it's like, well, where can we fit it? Last year it was held during the Australian men's test tour of Sri Lanka. I remember being there at the Travis Head press engagement that we did where he was awarded the Alan Border Medal with us. We were there when he was given the award. We did kind of like a half a dozen journos there watching him get it given to him before he was interviewed. On tape delay, and it was all under embargo and that type of thing. So it's a lot different to how it was in those early years, I guess, when trying to find space in the ever crowded schedule. But Sutherland winning by 3 votes. So second time she's won it. You kind of think of Sutherland as an up and coming player in some respects, just because of the age profile. She's 24, but she's probably got the best cricket to come, and already the leading player in Australia on 2 occasions. Beth Mooney as well, there and thereabouts, who's won it a couple of times. I went back and looked at the award and the history of it back to 2002. Karen Rolton won it 4 times. Lisa Sthalekar twice when she was the ICC Player of the Year as well. Shelley Nitschke won it 4 times in a row from 2009 to 2012. Then there's a quirky one in Jess Cameron.
4 years in a row.
Yeah. Jess Duffin won it once in 2013, which is interesting. Just a reminder that for a moment in time, she was a superstar before, of course, that change in perspective for her and football becoming a factor and retiring probably earlier than would have otherwise been the case.
She was so good and she was pioneering. Like she was, purely in a cricket sense, she was my first sort of women's cricket crush in terms of the way she played. I loved the way she played. I loved that she could sweep or sort of hit her off her pads and hit clean sixes square of the wicket on the leg side. And she scored faster than anybody. I reckon her career strike rate was mid-80s, 84, 85 in one-day cricket, and nobody else did that. Lanning came along and started doing that later, but even to that point wasn't really, and Lanning sort of becomes the monster that Lanning becomes through that period and afterwards, and ends up with a strike rate of close to 100, I'd say, in one-day cricket. But, Jess Cameron was the one who was setting that mode, that agenda of being way more aggressive and being consistent, averaged close to 40 from memory in one-day cricket. It didn't really click for her in the Big Bash. She had one great Big Bash season, but otherwise was one of those sort of role players who'd make 250 runs in a season rather than 500. But, she packed that up a few years ago, 2022 or 3 or around then when she played her last Big Bash season.
Yeah, and she was doing that alongside footy, which got harder and harder as AFLW came along. Meg Lanning won 3 of them from 2014. Elise Perry won 3 of them as well, 2016, 2018, 2020. Who would doubt that Elise Perry wouldn't win another one? Then you go Mooney Gardner before the Sutherland two, and there was one for Elisa Healy in there as well. So it's a reminder of what a daunting Aussie team this has been. And a lot of the foundation for what we have today in this Australian team was laid by Alex Blackwell, who has been admitted to the Australian Cricket Hall of Fame. What a legacy she leaves. Just going back through the numbers alone, played between 2003 and 2018, 251 games, which was comprised of 12 tests, 144 one-dayers, 95 T20s. At her retirement, she was the most capped Aussie player, well over 5,000 international runs, ODI tons, captain 33 times across the formats, including leading Australia to the inaugural T20 World title in 2010, the first of 3 World Cups that she won in that format. Ashes winner more times than you can poke a stick at, including as captain in 2011, one-day World Cup winner in 2013 and also back in 2005 at the start of her career. She won 14 WNCL trophies and a couple of T20 trophies as well for the New South Wales Breakers. 9 of them as skipper, 9-time premiership captain. Thunder captain as well in the inaugural Big Bash in 15-16. So she was captain for 10 professional trophies for New South Wales and the Thunder. And that massive off-field presence with the Thunder administratively, on air as a broadcaster, the work she's done to be like a standard bearer on a lot of challenging issues within the women's game, the book that she wrote a number of years ago now, but important in laying a marker under the time that she played, I think, almost drawing a line under it and saying that was that, this can be now. And it was an excellent book that she wrote a couple of years after she retired. So there's lots to the Alex Blackwell story. And I've worked with her a little bit across the journey as well, and a great human being. So really pleased that she's been recognised in this way.
Yeah, Megan Maurice wrote that book with her, who's a great friend of the show and a supporter of what we've been doing and a colleague over the years too. So it's probably time. There's always been this sense that in some ways Alex Blackwell wasn't given the respect she deserved to some extent by parts of the Australian cricket establishment. You know, was never a sort of long-term captain, did those jobs when they were needed to be done, was the kind of player who was always willing to adapt what she was doing in order to try to satisfy the needs of what the team needed at the time at national level. But, you know, such a colossal career at state level, and that period we've talked about on Storytime when New South Wales were just undefeatable, and so much of that came down to her. So yeah, that's where they're at, and this side's moving on into the future. The Sophie Molyneux era has begun. They got knocked off in a rain-shortened game against India. A couple of interesting bits going on here, Adam, because we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when the announcement was made that you've got Talia McGrath and Ash Gardner named as vice captains. And I said at the time, I'm not sure if Talia McGrath is in their best 11 in certain formats all of the time, which you would want to be as a vice captain. And, I won't bang on about it again, but even looking at that team, I'm saying, is that a stronger team with Molyneux in it than it would be with Alana King in it? I'm not convinced that it is. But McGrath was left out of that side. Nicola Carey came back in. They've been flagging that they want to get Nicola Carey involved after she refused the national contract 3 years ago and refined her game at domestic level. And now she's back in contention for national honours. But there she is. She was in the side, and well, it didn't much matter in the end because India got the Waikiki formula going in their favour.
Yeah, they did bowl out Australia for 133 inside 18 overs, so they earned the DLS bump from that, and they were 50 for 1 after 5.1 overs with Verma and Mandela getting them off to a flyer. So they comfortably won. I suppose they won by 1 ball when you consider the way that DLS kicks in after 5 overs when the rain finally arrived. They go to Canberra midweek and then Adelaide on Saturday to round out that part of the series, and 3 one-dayers, and then we finish with a test match between the 6th and 9th of March at the Wacker. But yeah, I agree. The first thing that jumped out at me was where's Talia McGrath, and Nicola Carey's a fascinating story, really, that she decided to make a real clear move away from the national system, and yet this has been when she's been picked on a more regular basis, at least recently. So yeah, there's more to play out there, and yeah, top scoring for Australia was Georgia Wareham, who made 30 from 19. Renuka Singh got busy early on, and then Arundhati Reddy picked up 4 in the middle overs there with her medium pace. They've said India quite clearly they are determined to win a bilateral series in Australia for the first time since 15-16 when they won the T20s, a series that we covered way back when, Jeff, at the very start of our journey covering this Australian women's team. So good on India for getting one up there, and so much cricket to come in that series. And, all eyes will be on what happens in the test match, especially because that tends to be the way these things go. But these limited overs games lay the foundation very neatly in a multi-format series.
I like that they've got Wareham a bit further up the order. She batted 6 in that game, particularly in the short format. Such a destructive hitter, which would, I think, if you're having her bat higher, that might help make more room for Alana King further down if they want to look at that into the future. A little interesting move as well made in New Zealand. Not an unexpected move, I think you'd say, but Amelia Kerr taking over formally as captain of the White Ferns now that Sophie Devine has wrapped up. You talked about Annabelle Sutherland being young and also feeling like she's been around forever, because she played her first Big Bash season at 15. Amelia Kerr, she was 14, I reckon, when that viral clip went around of her playing for one of the domestic T20 women's teams. My brain keeps saying the Washington Wizards. That's not it. That's who Michael Jordan played basketball
Michael Jordan played for, yes.
That's not primarily who Michael Jordan played basketball for, but was it the Magic? Were they Wellington Wizards? Was there Magic involved? I don't remember the names of T20 franchises, but I remember her taking 4 wickets, I'm going to say, in a final, mostly wrong-uns, turning back in, but beautifully flighted leg breaks as well. And there was such a buzz and excitement about who is this kid, literal kid, who's walked out and who's playing professional cricket in New Zealand, the highest level you could play in the country at the time, and it didn't seem like long before she'd be playing for the national side, and indeed it wasn't. She's by far their most important player, especially now that Devine's wrapped things up, and she's taking the captaincy at the age of only 25, having played for 11 years.
Yeah, and a double hundred in there as well when she was a kid. I think she was 16 when she made that double hundred, wasn't she? So, 172 games she's already played of international cricket by 25, which is stunning. Nearly 4,000 runs and just over 200 wickets for the White Ferns. So she's ready for this, no doubt, and looking forward to seeing how she fares. They've got Zimbabwe in a bilateral series later this month to start the Amelia Kerr era formally. And also New Zealand cricket, we reported a few weeks ago that Scott Weinick had been moved on as chief executive. He fell on his sword, but essentially was ousted by the various stakeholders in New Zealand cricket. A former colleague of mine, Graham Parks, has taken over as the interim CEO. They're going to go through a process to appoint a full-timer. Interesting to see who has a dart at that. But Graham
It's going to be Amelia Kerr.
Parksy, who very kindly smuggled me into multiple events at London 2012, is now the interim chief executive of New Zealand cricket. Maybe, well, she won't, but maybe Claire Connor could have a dart at that. We have done, we have paid tribute to Claire Connor's extraordinary administrative career at the ECB on Storytime last week. That's the way it fitted with an answer we were doing. But Claire, after 18 years at the ECB, clearly someone we hold in high regard. We've had on the show. One of the best interviews we've ever done was with Claire Connor. She is finishing up at the Women's World Cup, a trailblazer in so many respects and such a massive contributor. Not that she doesn't get scrutinised for decisions as well. That's been an important part of all of this. But she will be leaving ECB, and maybe we should try and get her on for an exit interview around the World Cup, Jeff. That might be fitting to speak to her one final time before she goes on to whatever comes next, and she'll have plenty of options, that much I'm certain of.
Maybe like 2 weeks later, once the dust has settled, once she's willing to. Well, people can give very interesting interviews once they're no longer at the organisation. That's all I'm going to say.
It might be one of those ones where you get right bottle of wine, tape recorder on. That might be the way we do it. And I'm sure she'll still retain a bunch of her ICC commitments and so on. So there'll be some things she can't talk to, but a lot she will be able to. Jeff, as we get towards our first break, we've got a really nice Maurice Blackburn thing to get to, by the way, at the end of the show. So I'll flag that's coming if you want to listen all the way through to the end. But another one of our long-term partners like Maurice Blackburn are Cbus Super, who've been with us, Jeff, since the very start of Final Word when we went independent and so on. And, of course, they're an industry fund there to benefit their members, that strong history of delivering their investment returns across more than 4 decades. Industry Super, what a beautiful piece of policy it was to start superannuation when they did. And Cbus, right at the start of that, check them out today, Cbus Super. You can read the PDS and TMD by going to cbussuper.com.au to determine whether Cbus is the right fit for you. Past performance, of course, not a reliable indicator of future performance. But yeah, just wanted to acknowledge them and thank them here on the weekly show. They're with us on the on the dailies at the moment as well. But they are truly from the start with us. There's nobody who's been with us as long as Seabus.
Work out whether they are the fit. Get your super sorted out. Check out what's happening for you. See what your current lot are delivering, and just see what's going on. That's all I'm going to say. Take this into your hands. This is your future that we're talking about. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to be back with Emma John with her final segment of Emma John's tour of Australia. We're going to talk about the places that were neglected during the Ashes-focused chat, the places that didn't have Ashes tests. We're going to go to the Northern Territory, to Tasmania, maybe to Jake Sheedy's winery, and to the ACT. It is the final word. It's still the final word, and it's almost sad to say that, Emma John, this will be the last time, for the time being at least, that we come to you to talk about Emma John's tours around Australia, the travels that you did over the southern summer, and the fact that you are now back in London where it is dreary and cold, and anybody who is in the UK should be wanting to come to Australia because it was 33 degrees today in Melbourne. It was delightful. Hello, nice to see you, and Adam.
Hello, yes. Yeah, I mean, yesterday was a very, very cold, very, very wet day in London. I'm not going to lie, I did get out some of my notebooks and journals and look back to where I've just been and think, when can I get there again? 150th anniversary test. That sounds like a good thing to aim for next year.
And what we're going to do here is we're going to go to the very top of Australia, to the top end, to the Northern Territory, which is one of the places you're yet to tell us about, but a place you know an awful lot about, having visited many times across your life.
The Northern Territory is a part of Australia which is so interesting to me, partly because obviously when you talk to Australians about it, not a lot of Australians say, oh yeah, I know the Northern Territory well. It is proper Australian wilderness, a lot of it. Obviously, it's got some of the big hitters like Uluru and Alice Springs, Catherine. It's got Kakadu National Park, a place I've been often, and which is one of the largest national parks in the world. I mean, it's insanely large. So we know that it's this big space where there's a lot of wildlife and a lot of really remote. If you want to go and see Australia, the remote, this is where you go. But it is a special place in my heart because when I was 1 year old, my grandma, who had been widowed and was remarrying, she moved to Darwin and married a man who lived in Darwin. And so my grandparents have lived there all their lives. I've possibly been to the Northern Territory more times than many Australians have ever been there.
Brilliant. Did that mean you spent, I mean, the time you've gone most recently, are there places you return to and go, you had like these lovely childhood like memories of them?
Yes, I mean, Darwin itself is a fascinating place. It has changed so much. When I was the youngest I can remember, Darwin Airport still seemed to be kind of a corrugated tin shed, as far as I can remember in my little brain. As an adult now, going back, Darwin, I mean, it has had so much money invested in it. There's a lot going on there. And the other thing that has really drastically changed is that, you know, the thing that was very memorable from my childhood was it's a very hot place where you couldn't swim in the sea because there were Portuguese men of war, these box jellyfish things in the sea. But there's been this $1 billion redevelopment along the waterfront. I think the development was called the Waterfront. And there's a brand new hotel there. There's all these new lovely restaurants. And crucially, there is this netting that is not just shark netting, but it is this jellyfish netting so that you can really kind of enjoy the swimming. But having said that, a lot of the things I used to love about Darwin are still there. So the markets are incredible. The ones that we particularly used to go to were the sunset markets at Mindle Beach. The clue's in the title. The most electric, beautiful sunsets as you're wandering around the stalls. But there's markets like all through the week. There's the Parrap markets. There's the Nightcliff markets on Sunday. The Nightcliff ones are the kind of like cool, hip, secondhand, vinyl, vintage. Darwin is sort of famously a melting pot of cultures, particularly from Asia, because it was so long a trading post with China and Southeast Asia. So the food, oh my goodness, you know, you go to these markets and the food stalls, every different kind of Asian food you've ever tried and a whole bunch you haven't. I discovered Nyonya cuisine while I was there. My grandparents and I have a favorite restaurant called Hanyuman, which is I think it's on Mitchell Street, I can't quite remember, but it's Malaysian Nyonya cuisine, which is kind of a mix of two different cultures. You will just taste flavors that you genuinely haven't tasted before there.
I think that was what really jumped out at me the first time I went to Darwin. and I would have been early 20s by the time I'd got there for the first time. And it was just how different it felt to every other city I'd been to in Australia. And I had travelled in Southeast Asia by that point. Darwin feels like an Asian city. There's just a difference, a cultural difference. The street markets, like you say, being able to walk in and around stalls and just pick up street food as you go, it had such a different atmosphere. And then that's to do with the weather and things as well. It's such a moody kind of place. You've got your monsoon rainy season, you've got your blazing hot seasons. It was just something that was so new, and it was so exciting to think I'm still in the country that I'm notionally from, but this is this whole new fresh part to it. And then you go inland, you end up at like Lerder Gorge or something like that. You drive up the rivers. There are places that don't have crocodiles where you can swim in certain water holes if you know where the waterways are and get taken to the right places by the right people. And suddenly you're into that red centre, which is it's such a short drive out of Darwin before you realise the great internal vastness of the continent begins there.
And not just red. So this is what's fascinating to me about the Northern Territory. I wrote a piece about it once where I was really trying to grapple with how I felt about it, because it's alien. It's alien, you know, to me as a Brit, and I suspect it might be alien to some Australians who live on the coast. I don't know, but like it feels like you're on another planet. And it is partly, yes, you know, you are suddenly so remote and the red centre, etc., but also the greenness and the rainforestness. Like you said, this kind of monsoony climate. Most people travel there in the dry for good reason. I am the kind of person who I've traveled there in the wet as much as I've traveled there in dry. I've traveled there in the build-up, which is the hardest time to be there, because the build-up is when it's really, really hot and there's still no rain, but everything is ridiculously humid. The best way to explore it, honestly, is you can self-drive, and absolutely there'll be routes and there's camping places and you can work out your own trip. But if you go with a guide, you will really get the best out of it, because they can take you to the places that you might be a little bit like, oh, that's too remote for me. And they will take you to the beautiful places. But what they will show you is a landscape and an ecosystem, the flora and the fauna that is just completely new to you and is like being on a different planet. Some of the plants are so enormous that you think I'm in Jurassic World right now. You know, I have there should be dinosaurs around the corner kind of thing.
In this episode, we're going around to parts of Australia that weren't Ashes venues. Now, Hobart was 4 years earlier, but wasn't this time. But Tasmania as a state, what a remarkable story that has been over the last 10 to 15 years.
And I'll tell you who else loves Tasmania. My dad. My dad went to Tasmania for the first time this winter while I was out for the Ashes, while I was following the cricket. He got a camper van in Tasmania and drove around. He came back. I've never seen him so delighted by anything. He was just like, how soon can I get back to Tasmania? What a wonderful place. And it's really funny, isn't it? Because you think of it as this kind of quite small place, island, it's quite contained. How much is there to see? He did a week in a camper van and he is desperate to go and see more. So I think it's that kind of, again, landscape environment. You are somewhere that is so unchanged in lots of ways, that landscape, that you can just, it's a really beautiful place to be in nature. Certainly that's been my experience of it. I did a wonderful walk called the Wookalina Walk, which is an Indigenous-led walk by Palawa guides. You start just outside Launceston and you walk. Wookalina is the Indigenous name for Mount William. So you're walking through land on country with guides who can talk to you about not only how this country used to be. And what's fascinating, I remember standing at the top of Wookalina, and if you look out in one direction, you see the farmland and you see the pastoral landscape, which Tasmania is famous for. And then if you look the other way, you see the bush and you see the little clearings in the bush. And that is what that whole countryside used to look like. It was bush with the clearings that were made by the Indigenous communities there, where they would clear land with little fires in order to get the animals to run in there so they could hunt for them. And it's just a wonderful thing. People think because Tasmania has this, another place in Australia that has a really kind of, am I allowed to use the word wretched history between settlers and Indigenous folk, where the Indigenous communities were just removed from Tasmania. So there's this kind kind of belief that there are sort of, there's no Indigenous culture in Tasmania anymore. Well, this walk, it's a 4-day, 3-night walk, just like puts paid to that, because people are going back and showing you how actually the culture was carried down the matrilineal line. So even when communities were moved off to Cape Barren Island, there are still families and generations who have kept the culture alive and will happily take you on country. They've built this beautiful eco camp. I think it's called the Larapuna Standing Camp. Oh my goodness. You feel like you've just walked into a design museum kind of space. It's so beautiful. What a gorgeous place to stay in the middle of the countryside. And it's near enough the coast that you can kind of walk down. You see the enormous middens, mounds, dunes of seashells, which were meeting places. Then you go down to the coast and you walk down to the Larapuna, which is the name for Bay of Fires. You see the beautiful crescent beaches and the lichen covered rocks that make them also sort of glow red. Again, it's kind of like I say, it's this going to a world that you otherwise wouldn't get to go to. I mean, it's a huge privilege.
Yeah. I think the thing with Hobart is it's the perfect size small city to go to for a few days, because you can walk around, you can find your way around it. There's a lot going on. There's all of the life at the middle of the city, Salamanca Market, places like the gallery that John Kudelka set up, RIP, things like the football team that will be coming to town, the stadium that's going to get built, obviously Mona, the museum that so many people are drawn to. It's something like 60% of people who go to Tasmania are going there to see that museum. So you can do that as a 3 or 4 or 5 day trip, but then you can also get outside Hobart and there's this vast wilderness that's been protected over a lot of people fighting over a long period of time to make sure that's still there. Another place that maybe doesn't get the love is Canberra. We had a running joke with Adam on this show that he's like the Canberra representative. He's the leading spokesman for Canberra as it is. You talk about museums a lot, Emma. It's the museum capital. We talk about the files that we dig through from the Australian War Memorial for the History Show. An extraordinary place there to go and visit. The Observatory, the National Library. There's also this amazing small gallery scene, places like Civic Art Bureau and the places that are doing small stuff with local artists. Then you could go down to the Polish Club and have a bunch of pierogies and drink some Eastern European beers with the people who are hanging around there. There's like a whole garage band house party scene that's going on in the suburbs underground. You can take the train there from Sydney in a few hours. There's a lot going on in Canberra and the ACT.
Oh, look, it's been a dozen years since I've lived there, Emma, so I want to keep it in perspective. But I have written about Canberra. When I went into journalism, one of the first things I did was write about the joys of Canberra. It is a beautiful place. It is very easy on the eye. It is very accessible. Everything's about a 10-minute drive from one another, which is a feature, not a flaw, I assure you. The cultural triangle piece that Jeff refers to before, which it's all free. It's all subsidised. It's all free. So you don't need to sort of feel like you're going there and spending lots of money in order to get that cultural nourishment. It's the ability to walk around a city that was designed, a city that was planned and planned to perfection. So, yeah, I look back extremely fondly on my days living in the ACT, in the suburbs of Canberra. I lived south of Lake Burley Griffin primarily, but I always envied those who lived north of it as well. And, of course, how can you go past the biggest building by square metre in Australia, New Parliament House, which was opened in 1988. So you go down the hill to Old Parliament House, which closed then and became over time the Museum for Australian Democracy, which of itself is a beautiful and well-maintained and curated thing, which is a must-visit for a first-timer to Australia to understand how our democracy functions. But then going up to New Parliament House, which was designed so splendidly and so many people work in each day, and, of course, where the laws of the land are agreed upon. So there's something magical about Canberra, and it's, again, had that international recognition. A bit like Hobart, Jeff, who you mentioned with Tasmania. So it's been for the ACT in Canberra, where people from abroad have came in and seen it and written about it and put it on lists and that type of thing, which wouldn't have been the case 20 or 30 years ago.
150th anniversary test. I feel like this is what's happening. Coming back, Melbourne to Sydney road trip via Canberra. That's the one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Easy. You can do it on the train, Emma. We know you like a long train trip. And there is, the ACT is not just Canberra. There's a whole lot of outdoor activities. There's lots of mountain biking and hiking and things like that in the hills, the wilderness around there. So it's not just states. There are territories as well. And we're here to fly the flag for the territories today on Emma John's tour of Australia, which wraps up this week. This is it. Thanks to Tourism Australia. They supported the whole project to make sure that Emma got to where she needed to go and could show us our own place through fresh eyes. I think that's what it's been about as an Australian. And if you're in the UK and thinking that I hope that I don't have to sit through next winter, make your plan now. Come out, spend time with us. We are almost entirely nice people, and we will largely be very pleasant to you. Memories to last a lifetime. Isn't that the line? Come back and see us soon, Emma.
I've got a lot of memories. I can't wait to come back and make more. Yeah. Thank you for letting me to come and just talk to you about all the amazing experiences I've had, because it's been lovely for me to revisit them when I'm back in cold, dark London.
Thank you to Emma John, who has not only been on our weekly show for the last 8 weeks, but was on our very first episode ever of The Final Word. That is a relationship that goes back further than any other on the show. The original co-host, guest, whatever you want to call it. The show wasn't even called The Final Word at that point. That's how far back we go through the eras. So lovely to spend some time with her and her infectiously cheerful personality over the last few weeks. And I'm sure she'll be back on at some point to talk about whatever it is that we're talking about next. What are we talking about next, Adam?
It's almost time for County Wraps to become a feature of our weekly show again.
Oh, wow.
Here's a preemptive County Wrap. We're 6 weeks away from, I think 6 weeks, maybe 7 weeks from the first ball being bowled in the championship of 2026, which is exciting. One little cue that you know the season is near is Wisden, the Wisden Cricketers Almanac, releasing their cover image, which started back in 2003 when Tim Delisle was the editor. And Lawrence has maintained that tradition. This year, it is a photo of Chris Wokes with his arm in the sling as Mohammad Siraj is bowling the ball to Gus Atkinson that knocks him over. It was the iconic image of last summer, wasn't it, with Wokes walking down the steps at the end of a thrilling test series that went all the way down to the wire, and that final test being decided by 6 runs with Siraj there at the end getting the job done for India. So it felt like the right frame to capture the best bit of last summer.
He's a giver, Mohammad Siraj. He gets the job done. It was... I wanted Chris Wokes to face a ball, though. That's the one thing that was missing from that story. I needed him to face 1 or 2 deliveries. You know, there needed to be a single taken at some point. There had to be they try to take the 2, but they can't get back, something like that. He had, if he'd one-handed blocked out a ball or 2, then there would have been there would have been jam in the middle of the Lamington of that story. It was a very good Lamington, but a thick layer of homemade raspberry jam in the middle, that would have been managing to see out a couple of balls before the final wicket came at the other end. You know, that's what I want.
He spoke quite a bit in the post-season circuit, Jeff, you know, the awards nights and whatnot that we tend to go to in October here. And Wokesy, I reckon we can use his nickname now that he's retired. Wokesy explained how he fully intended to bat left-handed. Like, he's like, no, there was no dramas. We were netting. We were ready. We were in the indoor school. We were good to go. It would have been messy, but I would have batted almost like table tennis style, you know, would have came out ready to have just kind of swatted it away with one hand and found a way to have gotten through. So that would have been fascinating had it happened, but yes, that was the image for Wisden. Other bits and pieces around the Shires. Sikandar Raza, who has also been on The Final Word, is going to be playing for Worcestershire in the Blast. What a good signing that is, Sikandar Raza, who played his role in beating Australia a few days ago, which we didn't even talk about in the first segment of the show, but believe you me, we did plenty of it on The Daily Show. So
I'm sure you did.
We had much more to add on that front. Kate Cross has signed a 1-year deal with Lancs, which is nice. I think there was half a sense that she might have wrapped it up, having missed out on her England contract, but she's going to go around and play for Lancs, in addition to, of course, playing with whatever the Superchargers are now called in the Brave New World. I think they're called...
the Elephants.
I have no idea.
Elephants?
No, the Elephants is the other one, is the Manchester one. I don't know what the Superchargers, the Yorkshire team, have become. It'll be something horrific, I'm sure.
Something. So at least they were already super, so then they can just be the super something. Super Giants. Are they Super Giants? Are they Super Kings?
Actually, that makes sense. Maybe are they the luck now? You know what? Let's not speculate. I do not know. I know about what's happening at Lords. I know what's going on with MCC. I don't know what's going on around the country.
If you've just signed James Anderson to captain your men's team, you got to give Kate Cross another year. True. Basically, if you're Lancs.
Now, I like this. One of the myriad 2-meter Peters. There was Peter Street. Peter Fulton is another.
Peter George.
I'm missing one of the two. Peter George. There it is. Peter George, Peter Street, Peter Fulton. Dream dinner party for me. 3 2-meter Peters all together. Peter Garrett, near enough's good enough. Near enough is good. In fact, he would be. He towers over me, and I'm 191 or something, so he'd be 2 meters or thereabouts. 2-meter Peter Fulton is going to coach Middlesex, so he's the new coach there at Lords. So that will be an interesting brief, knowing that they've they've been an up and down sort of county in recent years, and they'd be crying out for some consistency there. Ben McDermott is going to play Blast at Lancs instead of Hants this year, which is a good signing given he dominated last year. Nathan McAndrew, I think I floated this last week. He's now officially signed with Glamorgan, so they've come up to Divi 1. That's going to be great to follow Glamorgan and Leicester in Division 1 this year. I'm really looking forward to those storylines. Of course, Leicester having never been promoted into the first division since the breakup of the comps, but a long time for Glamorgan as well, since they've played a lot of these counties in the top flights.
They were Never Been Kissed, Never Been Promoted. Was there a sequel to Never Been Kissed? What did Drew Barrymore do after pretending to go to high school and presumably getting kissed? I'm going to, full disclosure, I haven't seen Never Been Kissed, but I'm going to assume that at some point she was... there was kissing involving Drew Barrymore. Was there a sequel involving more kissing? What happened next?
You know what? It's half term. It is half term this week with Winnie.
Yeah.
We watched You've Got Mail on the sofa the other week. Maybe the next sort of rom-com 90s is Never Been Kissed. Is she old enough to watch that?
Sleepless in
Time
Seattle.
will tell. She's watched that too. She watched Sleepless in Seattle with Rach after she watched You've Got Mail, so she's in the groove with Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks at the moment. I'll put on Band of Brothers next to stick with the Tom Hanks theme. I have been rewatching The Pacific, which he also produced.
Yeah, probably not for a 6-year-old.
Bit violent, but great TV. Sam Constas wants a county. Now, last year we kind of tried to help with this. Will we try and help again? I don't know. Time will tell. Sam Constas.
What does Peter Fulton think of Sam Constas? What is 2 Metre Peter's view on the prodigy?
Well, last year the idea was get him to Middlesex, get him some games before the World Test final, which he didn't play in anyway. I think now for Sam Constas it would be get a game anywhere that will take you, get another 7 first-class games under your belt. Doesn't really matter where, doesn't matter what the circumstances are, just getting bulk 4-day cricket into this kid will be worthwhile, I've got no doubt. Speaking of New South Wales, Sean Abbott back to Surrey for, it must be a fifth or sixth campaign. He didn't play last year, but he's played for a long time at the Oval, so they'll be chuffed to bits to get him back. Midnight in Joel Paris. I saw something on social saying he's going to Yorkshire, which is great. He's a player that we've enjoyed the work of across the time with his frugal left arm fast medium. And speaking of Aussie quicks, who ends up back at Durham? Scott Boland, Brendan Doggett, maybe both of them. That'll all be resolved in the weeks to come. But yeah, it's that time of year where we're getting lots of different threads of county news and looking forward to providing dedicated coverage of all things England domestic cricket all the way through the summer, as we always have on The Final Word when we shift into season 20, which will be the trigger for all of that.
It's not time yet, though. It's not time yet. It's still the Australian season, even though most people in Australia seem to have forgotten that it is, in fact, cricket season still in Australia. The T20 World Cup is happening in a strange vacuum of where only the real enthusiasts in Australia are watching and everybody else in the cricket world is. But the domestic comp is still going on. The Dean Jones Cup, the DJC, and headlined, I would say, this week by, well, if you're looking for 2 metre options, Large Bo Webster, who made 138 off 122 balls. Got to go to India, get him on the plane, find another spot in the squad, injure another bowler, put another batter in. So they only have 9.
Got to go to
they
India.
Might need another one.
Oh, it's not the worst idea. He's rattled off 138 from 122 in a losing team. So Tassie have been brilliant in 50-over cricket. This was the first and only game they've lost. I'll come to the mechanics of that in a sec. But they were stuffed at 3 for sod all. Then, along with Tim Ward, Webster put on 237, the biggest 4th-wicket partnership in one-day cup history in Australia, so not for nothing. But then, WA held on. Teague Wiley, who has shown he's got pedigree, you could say, in his couple of years as a state cricketer, was there at the end. They won by 1 wicket, WA. So in terms of what that means for the table, with New South Wales getting up over South Australia, they're in second spot. WA, though, are in the same. I think they've got 4 fewer points, but for the same number of wins in 4th spot. And there are 1 more round of games. The guts of it is that Tassie are going to host the final. But what they realised, Jeff, remember when the Junction Oval weren't going to have their lights ready in time? A story we talked about 3 or 4 months ago, maybe longer. That required one of the women's one-day internationals to be moved to Hobart, maybe 2 of them, either way. And what that means is the original date for the Dean Jones Cup, the 28th of February for the final, has had to be moved to facilitate it being held at Bellerive, which is clever. I don't mind that. The 11th of March. But what are the unintended consequences of this? It's not like it is in like Saturday cricket where you need to play a minimum number of games to qualify for a final series. Who might have played in the T20 World Cup, who can return and now play in the decider, having not been anywhere near a domestic 50-over squad all season? Who might be stacked in? Who's branch stacking? I don't know whether Tassie would have much provision for that. I'm sure they do have some players in the T20 World Cup team. Maybe Matthew Wade. Could Matthew Wade come back from the T20 World Cup and slot straight into the 50-over team? He's almost certainly not been playing 50-over cricket. In fact, I'm sure he's not. He's been playing Big Bash. But Matthew Wade in a final, old blokes win stuff. Matthew Wade for the decider on the 11th of March, I say. Ides of March.
There we go. Make it happen. Make it happen. I mean, yeah, Tim David played for the Canes, but that's not the same as playing for Tassie. And, yeah, in terms of who else...
Nathan Ellis. Nathan Ellis will come back from... He'll play for Tassie. But it could be... As I mentioned before, it genuinely could be New South Wales, Queensland, WA, or even, I think even South Australia could feasibly make the final. So there are a bunch of combinations for that final round of games. They're being played on the 21st of February at the back of this Shield round, which has started today. So again, one of these situations where we don't have a lot to go on. But what I can report so far, may as well go through some progress scores. Should we get the right on the tip of my tongue playing as the backdrop? Queensland were rissoled for 185 by South Australia. Now, the most notable part of this game at Brisbane was Usman Khawaja, who only made 15, but he was worked over by a lad called Campbell Thompson on debut, 2 for 16. I saw the super cut. A left-arm bloke who swings it. Australia might be needing a left-arm bloke who swings it when that giant of the game, Mitchell Stark, eventually finishes up. So having one come through in the Shield and really impress. I do note, though, that Stuart Broad on social media saw that cut and replied, "Can you get any more grass on the pitch?" Because it was as green could be. But my sense was most of that was movement through the air. Victoria in a... Sorry, you go.
Well, I mean, just that we know from experience there are plenty of green-looking pitches. It doesn't mean that they are necessarily doing heaps. Like there can be grass on it, but there's not that much ball. What caught my eye with the Vicks card actually was poor old Matt Short, who's back there in the middle order after getting punted from the T20 World Cup squad at the last minute and made 42 in the middle order, which is the kind of score that won't give him much satisfaction. But it is Sam Harper season, and he's turned up opening the batting for the Vicks as they've got 330 plus for seven overnight.
And poor old Ollie Peake, straight back from the World Cup final last week, makes a 6-ball duck. But yeah, Sam Harper opening the batting, the wicketkeeper. He's going to have an international career. I don't know in what format. I don't know when, but Sam Harper for Australia sometime soon. Got to get into India.
And Tassie and New South Wales, Tassie have been done like a dinner, all out for 136. New South Wales are in the lead. And what interests me here, Adam, is that one K. Patterson, 29 not out, with the chance to go on, the magic of the overnight. Imagine if he drives it into an impregnable position and the chopper from Silverwater is carrying him straight back to the Australian Test team. 5 wickets for Liam Hatcher in knocking over the Taswegians cheaply in that game.
Yeah, and just taking that bigger picture, look at all of this. So Victoria and WA is a massive game because I know they're away from home, but Victoria have to get a result there just to consolidate where they've been. They're almost certainly going to host and make the final, but they'll want to host it for obvious reasons. Then Queensland in second spot, followed by Tassie, South Australia, New South Wales. All of them probably bar... Yeah, I'd say that. All of them, bar WA, have a route to the final if all went well. So more on the Sheffield Shield when we come to you next week. And last but not least, Jeff, I just wanted to come back to, as promised, the Ranji Trophy. Now, the context here, for those who don't listen to Storytime, if you're not listening to Storytime, by the way, why are you not? That's our weekend history program. We said that we would follow...
That's where you get the beers given away. If you want to know if you've won the beers, you have to listen to Storytime. That's true.
Spot on. But we were at the very end of the season, and I was very bullish about Maharashtra winning the trophy for the first time since the Second World War. Well, I'm sorry to say, after me building them up, it looked like they were in a position where nothing could go wrong. But in the final round, Madhya Pradesh beat them. So very Richmond vibes here. They managed to lose their last 2 games, Maharashtra, to finish one spot out of the finals. They were bowled out for 179 and 133. So to our man, Ankit Bourne and Prithvi Shaw and all the lads down there at Maharashtra, lick your wounds, go again next season. Who is there, if you're wondering? Karnataka are piling up the runs against Lucknow. Devdutt Padigal, 148, not out in the game that's taking place right now. And Bengal playing Jammu and Kashmir, where honours were even at stumps on day one. The final is next week. I promise you we will give you a report on the final, whoever it is that makes the Ranji Trophy decider this year.
Okay. We have one more thing to do before we go, which is to tell you a story. This isn't story time, but this is going to be a story. So we've been soft launching. We've been dabbling, putting our feet into the water, then the ankles, then the knees, as we've been talking about the Maurice Blackburn Greatest Comebacks competition. And we've been teasing this. We haven't been ready to announce the full range of everything that's going to happen, but we said we wanted to hear about your greatest comebacks. And so in order to test the waters in week one, we turned to the great copywriter, Sheehan Arnott, whose work was so appreciated by people on the show. And he was providing copy for a client. And this is a story from him about his greatest comeback. Let me begin. Anyone who has played the game will have a favourite match that they've played, and invariably it's one where they have materially affected the outcome. This one is mine. Our story takes place in the dizzying heights of WASTCA 5th grade. We were an okay team but got thrashed most weeks that season, and this week a one-day fixture was no exception. I don't remember who we were playing, but I'm sure they were the worst blokes in the comp. We'd been rolled for about 140, and at drinks we were staring down the barrel of an early finish with the Oppo 2 for 100. But here's where it got interesting. I wandered over to look at the scorebook, and to say that this was a dog's breakfast would be an understatement. We headed back out onto the field, and as the runs continued to flow, I noticed more and more people gathered around the book. With half a dozen runs to win, their captain roared from the non-striker's end that the book had better add up. The over ended with the scores tied, and the second ball of the next over was called a wide, a typically humiliating end to a humiliating day. Their captain asked if we could play out the over to make sure they'd actually passed our score. And here's where our hero of the story emerges. I got involved. I interjected and said to the umpire that we couldn't keep playing just because they might have made a mess of the scorebook, and he agreed, pulled stumps, and was seemingly into his car and off to the pub before we'd even finished shaking hands. The ending here is probably pretty obvious. The books didn't add up and scores were tied. There was talk of putting the stumps back in and playing one more ball, but we stood fast. The umpire had left, and that was that. If you thought Justin Langer kicking over a bin in the test was funny, you should have seen their captain launch into a bin, not realising it was cemented into the ground. Monday morning came around, and it was left to me by our skipper to write a submission to the league following the controversial ending to Saturday's match, and the central thesis was this. The only thing certain at the time the umpire pulled stumps was that they had not passed our score, and who was to say we wouldn't have taken 8 for none? After all, cricket is a funny game. Bizarrely, the league agreed with us. The game was declared a draw, and we split the points. A remarkable comeback from having lost the game by 8 wickets. Perfection.
Wow. I remember that happened when I was probably 13. That happened in an Endeavour Hills fixture down the grades where the book, exactly the same thing. The book, although there wasn't the ability to call the players back because everyone just assumed it was all good. And then about half an hour later, when tallying them up, there was the recognition that it was one short. In fact, I think it was 2 short. I think we lost the game. I wasn't playing, but we lost the game having thought Endeavour Hills had passed the score by 1 short. The Oppo got given the points on the basis that the book was fucked. So it does happen. It's rare, but it does happen. Get your comeback story in. They can be anything, just like that belter from Sheehan. All you need to do is email info@finalwordcricket.com. Tubes will pick it up at his end. Get you into the show, and the prize for the best story is a belter. And I'm gonna just keep my powder dry on this, but the prize is worthwhile. Get your submissions in. The prize will be drawn at the end of March. You got about 6 weeks or thereabouts to get your submissions in. We'll keep reading them out and keep collecting them and that kind of thing. info@finalwordcricket.com. Jeff, that's us done for another weekly edition of The Final Word. Thanks to Step One as well, who we'll talk a lot more about on the weekend version of the show. And there'll be more social media on them as well. Speaking of our socials, we're flying on there at the moment. Thank you to Anakshi for all the work that she's doing behind the scenes. There'll be more Step One stuff on there where you can get your 15% discount link in the show notes. And that's all from Jeff and me. There'll be daily shows every single day of this T20 World Cup. There'll be story time with Jeff and me that'll come out on the weekend as well, because we can't stop and we won't stop, and we are very busy boys right now. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Join us on Patreon and all the usual things, and we'll catch you soon.
See you later.